Byline Audio.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. From the co-director of Shrek and the visionary behind Toy Story comes Spellbound, a magical new animated adventure starring Rachel Zegler, John Lithgow, Jennifer Lewis, Nathan Lane, and Titus Burgess with Javier Bardem and Nicole Kidman. When a powerful spell turns her parents into monsters, Princess Elian must journey into the wild to reverse the curse before it's too late. Watch Spellbound, only on Netflix November 22nd.
Hello and welcome to the Byline podcast. My name's Adrian Goldberg. This is an edited, but not too heavily edited version of a conversation we had on Byline Radio, asking listeners if they were joining the Exodus from X, the social media platform formerly known as Twitter. German football club St. Pauli amongst the latest refugees to blue sky, saying that Elon Musk has turned X into a hate machine designed to influence elections. They must have been listening to some of our podcasts and been reading the Byline Times. St. Pauli have joined The Guardian, which called X a toxic media platform. We've previously discussed whether the Byline empire, for want of a better word, should quit as well, but have hitherto decided that we wanted to stay and fight our corner in what was, until Musk took over 2 years ago in a $44 billion deal, a flawed but very usable platform. One of Musk's first actions was to cull 50% of the company's staff, including many of those working in moderation, and it's been accused of spreading misinformation and right-wing bias ahead of the recent US election, not to mention allowing pro-Putin propaganda to flourish. Musk has already been handed a job by Donald Trump, heading up a new department aimed at creating a more efficient government. I was joined by Byline Times executive editor Peter Jukes and Byline Times US correspondent Heidi Sigmund-Kuda, and I asked her to set out why X has fallen into such disrepute.
2 years ago in Byline, we wrote the first Unmust report, how Twitter was going to be turned into a weaponized hate machine, that it was a $44 billion PSYOPs cannon designed to influence the 2024 election. We wrote that it was going to become a lot like a Russian propaganda outlet under the guise of social media. And I think we've seen all of that come true. I think that it was very clear when Musk posted his first, Hitler meme aimed at Justin Trudeau, what was really happening. And for me, because I've been thinking about this since you told me we're going to do this space, I believe the dirty secret is that the enemy owns all the battlefields, which goes to my broader point that Silicon Valley has long been a kind of influence operation. It's laden with money from hostile foreign powers. And I have said over and over again, when do we get to the part where we make these platforms public utilities? We all use them for communication, but we have been behind enemy lines for a very long time. And I feel countries need to do a lot more to start protecting the infosphere of their citizens. We talk a lot about data privacy, but we get none. And I know we're going to talk about this, but I'm just going to get it out of my system. I went over to Blue Sky to meet some of my friends. It sounds nice, Blue Sky, how lovely. But I spent the first few hours letting all my friends know that they were following stalker accounts impersonating me. So, the influence operation got there before I even did. And, I don't care that Jack Dorsey's not there anymore. He promotes Elon Musk. And I feel like the taint lingers. It might be nicer for a while, but we have a bigger, more urgent issue. And that's simply that the enemy owns the battlefields. And what are we going to do about it?
I think one of the hardest things for people to get their head around is that Musk paid £44 billion for X, and there was a whole dance about wouldn't he buy it? Clearly, with the scale of this exodus at the moment, and he's already seen a massive departure of advertisers from X, which I think was losing $4 million a day when he took it over. This is not a profitable business. But as he continues, you realise he doesn't care. It was never the purpose to run a profitable business.
No, the purpose was literally to ensure that their guy Trump would get into the White House, because to the victor goes the spoils. And imagine all the money that everybody can make with somebody as uniquely criminal as Trump back in the White House.
Let's bring Peter Jukes in here. Peter, Heidi is very sceptical, as we can hear, about Blue Sky. Those of us who've just been sampling it for a few days may experience it differently. See, it's a breath of fresh air compared to the sex bots and the right-wing cranks that seem to dominate so much of X conversation, even when you've attempted to block and mute many of the idiots who might follow you.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be a bit careful. It's a public benefit corporation, right? So it does, unlike Twitter, have some kind of charitable remit. The other good thing about Blue Sky is you own your own handle and you can move it around. I think you can incorporate it if you have a company. So it has thoughts open source in a way that Twitter isn't. So it has got some benefits going. There are some lessons learned. But look, if the product is free, you are the product. We've got to learn that. Why is Silicon Valley giving us all these free apps and Facebook and Twitter and things like that? Because it monetizes us. It uses our data. It sells us ads. The business model of Blue Sky yet to see. And we've been riding on this wave of techno optimism and techno utopianism. Well, isn't it great it's all free? And of course, it ends up in techno dystopia because we realize these billionaires who've made their money at our expense, our data worth estimated about $500 a year, your data on Facebook. And we have to live in the world as we find it, not as we would like it to be. I'm, by the way, on this issue of Blue Sky, Twitter, I'm distinctly non-binary. I don't see why you can't do a bit of both. It's not a place to converse. It's not a place to read any of the responses on X. It's just a cesspit of far-right idiots and influence operations. And in a way, thank you, Musk, at the cost of the election, you've shown us just how Cambridge Analytica can work at scale, how you can micro-target Muslim voters angry about Gaza, saying you'll be on their side, and then also right-wing Jewish people who think that you'd be on their side, pro-Netanyahu. So we have been revealed to us just the scale, exactly as Heidi says, of how these tech platforms work, how they're ideologically constructed around their owners. It's a very sad day for me in some ways. I did build my late autumn of my life journalistic career on Twitter. I live tweeted the phone hacking trial. I saw lots of great stuff like the green unfulfilled green revolution in Iran, all kinds of stuff, information come so fast on Twitter that you could really do amazing research, meet amazing people. I recruited most of the journalists for Byline Times, whether staff or freelance, by meeting them first on Twitter. So I think it's good to find another space where you can have human interactions rather than bot interactions. And I'd recommend Blue Sky for that. But one of the reasons why we're in print is, in the end, don't trust any of these oligarch sluggers.
Heidi, there have been two spikes in departures from X. One was the relatively recent decision by Musk, which I confess I'm still getting my head around, which said that if you've blocked people, well, they remain unable to comment on your posts, but they're no longer going to be blocked from seeing what you say, which, of course, allows them to gather information that they might regard as useful to use against you, perhaps in some other arena. Have you been able to understand what that was about? Because it's certainly alienated many X users. And the second switch off point for X has been the US election, when it's become apparent that Musk has been working for Trump and has now been given his reward in this government role. But that block thing, I just didn't understand that from a user friendly point of view.
I have sort of philosophically accepted the fact that we've been in a post privacy world for a long time. And so I have kind of a different viewpoint on it. Primarily since I've started my podcast, Radicalized Truth Survives, we have had a dedicated stalker brigade who work 14 to 16 hours a day to ensure that they malign anything I and my partners do or say. And so I have gotten very kind of thick-skinned about this stuff, because for me, it's always been a sign that those who do good work attract these, stalkers. And quite frankly, the information sphere was intentionally shattered a long time ago. So whether they noodle the margins or make things less comfortable, it's going to be to each, user to their like own, level of pain, like how much can they take. And for me, it's always been the platform where the counter messaging has to happen. I've always viewed it since 2016, I should say, into 2017 as a battlefield. And I never dismissed it so much as a virtual battlefield, because I could see that we were living more and more of our real lives on these places and spaces. And as Peter said, where are my closest allies in this fight from? From Twitter, from a random comment somebody makes when I used to have my comments open, and intel that was given to me. And the whole investigative reporting, methodology shifted into this incredibly brilliant ability to sort of crowdsource your investigations. I would be able to immediately reach out to somebody in Silicon Valley, a technologist like one of my podcast partners, and say, what do you make of the fact that yesterday we were talking about a story that the biggest backup data company in America that serves 81% of our Fortune 500 companies was created by two Russians in St. Petersburg, like help me understand this stuff. And so for me, it's a place where I continue to do counter messaging. I'm very aware that I'm behind enemy lines. And I believe that we were right a couple years ago when I quoted one of my podcast partners that this was a $44 billion psyops cannon to many people's, to anyone's minds. And every like you give, every picture you post, every retweet, categorized and weaponized, and it's used to target pre-existing cognitive biases. And Peter understands this because he was part of working with Carol Cadwalader early on, breaking this information and letting people know about it. And I really appreciate what Peter said about techno-optimism. I guess I still have some of it, because every day in my small way, I'm able to counter message, and every day I earn new friends and meet new people still, even as it's become this cesspool of propaganda. I still kind of wade through the muck to get the messaging out and to meet great people. And, I don't mind going someplace else, but what are we giving up? This legacy of years and years. I can think of a keyword, type in my last name, find a thread from 19 or 2019 that immediately addresses whatever breaking news is occurring in that moment. And I don't know that I'm willing to give that up. Maybe I'll be forced to.
No, well, it's interesting. And you've spoken very passionately about not giving up the town square, and X has liked to brand itself, hasn't it, as the town square of the internet. It hasn't always been the biggest in terms of users, in numbers of users on the internet, but in terms of, I suppose, what you might broadly term the political classes, people who are interested in political debate, current affairs, conversations, and so on. It kind of cornered the market in that, certainly in its days as Twitter, and there was an innocence about it. You could meet people that you'd never met before, and I think there is even now an emotional attachment to it, even though it's become what it's become.
Yeah, I mean, maybe old habits die hard, but I want to tell everybody a quick story about Yale professor Jason Stanley, who wrote How Fascism Works. He, like me, had a dedicated stalker brigade, and it was really psychologically debilitating, because unless you have gotten some help for that type of warfare and, like me, grown 5 layers of skin, it is nothing nice, right? So he got off of Twitter the day after Musk bought it. And when I interviewed him subsequently, one of my questions was, how does it feel to be off Twitter? And he said, get off. Tell everybody to get off, in that urgent way that people do when somebody's, maybe taking a bad street drug. He's like, get off. He said, not only have I never looked back, and I am so much better emotionally in kind of just dealing with, he had to recover from that period of continually being stalked, but also his ability to focus on the work that he needs to focus on, to do the deep dives and the deep historic research, was something that had been impacted by that quick hit of Twitter. And so he said that, his speed reading came back, his ability to really focus on long chapters of reading, historic books came back. And then, of course, he was able to write his next project, Erasing History. And I have found, because I've been on it a lot less in the last few months, and I have found that my ability to read books of historic value came back pretty quickly, because for a time I would read a paragraph and go back to Twitter, read a paragraph, go back to Twitter. I don't do that anymore. And it's definitely benefited, I believe, the work that I do and enriched it. So I think there's a little bit of maybe some sort of addiction parallel in there too. I don't know. You guys tell me.
Well, no, I think that's definitely true. As somebody who's trying to write a book at the moment, the urge to constantly promote podcasts for Byline is there with me, which may help Byline, but also may be a little bit of an addiction and an attempt to see what's going on. Peter, there is a practical side about this, because you talked about the role that Twitter had in helping you to crowdfund, to report the phone hacking trials, and then build an audience, which led to the creation of Byline. I know that doing the Byline podcast, as I have done for the last 4 years, that being able to promote it via Twitter and then X, for all of the horrors that we've described, it's been the number one tool. It's allowed us to reach an audience in a way that would have been impossible in the pre-digital age without a large budget, which we don't have.
Yeah, and we can't uninvent social media. I hear everything that Heidi says about addiction. Cal Cadwallader is a good friend of mine, and for various, mainly because women get so badly trolled by the far right. She was off it for several months, but it is an amazing tool if you've got like 900,000 followers like she has. You are a broadcast mechanism yourself. As Elon Musk said, we are the media now. And so there's a long-term shift away from traditional news organizations, and obviously the elevation of individuals, which I don't think is good. That's why we try to build a masthead with individuals at Byline Times. But two big thoughts about this. There's a great meme, I call it a meme now, I wouldn't have done back then, from about 10 maybe 20 years ago, 2004, when I first started blogging, right? And there's a sort of cartoon character, a woman saying, "You coming to bed, darling?" And somebody's typing away furiously. No, someone's wrong on the internet. Um, and the trolling. Look, I wrote a thing called "Flaming for Obama," one of my first ever journalistic pieces, along with a criticism of the BBC, which didn't do my career any good. I worked on the digital side, kind of non. Well, there were some professional people there, but on the Obama campaign in 2008, there were these primary wars between Hillary supporters and Obama supporters who'd win the nomination. There were a lot of fake Hillary supporters, actually Republicans, pretending to be Hillary supporters, but say racist things about Obama. And there were a lot of fake Republicans pretending to be Obama supporters, saying misogynistic things about Hillary. And it was a complete mess, and all these battles and people doxing each other and falling out, and then sock puppets and flame wars, and everything we've seen in micro 20 years ago. Well, that's 2008. Sorry, 16 years ago. Sorry, 18. Well, I can't even work it out. 18 years ago. No, 16. And we have to go through this. Social media is here, and I compare it like the early days of huge cities when you first had the railways. There's dirt, there's squalor, there's pollution, there's crime, there's everything you see in Dickens. But we eventually, well, most of them, certainly London, central London, I live, we learned how to live together with all these strangers, these vast cities you couldn't see the end of. We learned to put in hygiene and plumbing and public transport and police and youth clubs and all the things. And, ULEZ now and congestion charges, which makes central London actually quite a delight to live in. We'll have to do that with social media, and we're going to experiment in different ways. I'm never going to actually meet you in a smoky journalistic room in Fleet Street, Adrian, anymore. That's just not going to how it's happened. and we have to live with this world, train our attention, and use it for the best to build the communities. And I think, we can't do this live show on Blue Sky. So let's use the technology, which Elon Musk has paid billions for and screwed up, and for our own means. And any other alternative, Threads doesn't really work. It does sort of suppress political talk, as Meta does generally. Blue Sky seems to be the best option. Build your own platforms and occasionally even do something crazy. Print something and buy it in a shop.
Got a couple of very interesting retweets from Michelle Bob Paris. Thank you for these, Michelle. They're both interesting in their different ways and open up, I think, avenues of perhaps kind of disturbing thought for us on this conversation. So firstly, Michelle sends a tweet from Kate from Kharkiv. Kate is somebody who is, as far as I can tell, an ordinary citizen in Ukraine, and who presents an ordinary citizen's eye view of the ongoing war there. And Kate says, I'm still losing subscribers. If these are bots, I'm absolutely fine with it. But if real people are deleting their accounts to switch to another social media, please reconsider. You're leaving this platform, X, free for propaganda and leaving Ukrainians here to scream into the void even more. So I don't know if there's an issue with people like Kate from Kharkiv being able to use Blue Sky, or whether it's simply about the fear of losing your legacy followers. But I think that is a real issue here, isn't it? And touches on some of the issues that we've discussed, whereby people have got followings, they have got their own ecology that has developed around them on Twitter and then X. And to simply switch, maybe to leave those people feeling abandoned.
I mean, just on that, there are ways. I'm just looking, I have to get your archive, and you can port it over to Blue Sky. But we know, and I've reported on this when it emerged, that Musk had been in regular conversations with Vladimir Putin over the last 2 years, and his office, the office which created these doppelganger false networks, the presidential office. You could, various, like in detail, they're deliberately, the algorithm on Twitter suppressing Ukraine, making the spaces safety warnings. He has engineered the site for the benefit of Vladimir Putin and has downgraded reports of Ukraine war, depictions of it. It is such a transparent act of propaganda that Goebbels would be proud of, I think, were he alive today. So I don't see why you can't use, you don't have to log into X to actually view it, right? You can still get news from it. No doubt there were a lot of people are leaving, a lot of bots. There is still some use. So I don't see why one wouldn't have, we'll keep our corporate accounts because we can't do can't do the radio show on there. There is a danger, I think, as Heidi points out, that if we personally interact, and this happened on Facebook, with the hack, the Cambridge Analytica hack, they can profile us and then they can try to suppress us, ignore us, or find, friends and target them another psychometric score or something like that. So one way I do it is don't give X anything personal. Don't try to avoid, and what I used to do on Facebook, because this whole line, after 10 likes, Facebook analytics know you better than you know your friends know you after 50 likes.
But Peter, I hear what you say there, but of course, one of the things, and without being too cynical about this, one of the things that helps build audience is precisely to put those kind of things. So I've been in Washington, D.C., as you know, for Byline Times, and I'll dutifully put out 4 or 5 tweets a day advertising the podcast and so on. And that does generate listens for the podcast. But people love pictures of me having me dinner and such like. Or
people are strange. People are strange. And I didn't realise that you had a fan base. Why didn't you set up an OnlyFans account?
Well, my OnlyFans for my dinner account. But it's also personal stuff. So the other day I read an article in the magazine Vive le Rock, of which I am a subscriber, a must for all aging punks and goths, about Eddie Grant. And it was a really good article, essentially saying Eddie Grant is a much underrated talent in the UK music business. Time to rehabilitate him, time to give him his due recognition. And I thought, yes, again, that generated a great little thread. So I know what you're saying from
I'd,
there's kind of
keep
a
that off.
there's a Puritan view of this, but equally, people want to know who you are.
Can I just tell you?
They're-
Yes, and that's the problem. So
Mm.
when I spoke to Chris Wiley, the researcher, the guy who helped set up all the research for Cambridge Analytica, 6 months before Carol's article came out, because various reasons. And he said one of the most effective ways for targeting voters, right, was their Spotify likes. So even your music choices, your cultural. Steve Bannon famously said culture is upstream of politics. And then they segregate you, they target you on, this score, this ocean score. So they managed to get middle of the road people one of their first attempts, Cambridge Analytica, to test their technology. They psychometrically profile the 75 million people, profile and lookalike audiences from things like their Spotify, things like their food agent, or what gigs they go to, or, lols cats. And then they can go, well, you're high in conscientiousness, and we'll get you to vote for a right-wing candidate on a free speech message. And it worked for this guy's running. He didn't win, but Ken Cuccinelli in West Virginia, who was so extreme, thought all sex should be banned in marriage, right? Which is very difficult to police, I imagine. And they managed to swing a lot of sort of middle of the road Republicans on this message because they were high on openness and conscientious, the OC of the ocean score, the three other vectors. And basically said, he speaks his mind and so do you. And I remember about that time meeting a black woman from New York, said, I thought maybe Indian background, actually, was in the country, a friend of a friend, said, I'm voting for Trump because free speech. So what I do on Facebook is like really odd things, so it doesn't know who I am. So, and this is a problem. It's not just Musk, it's everywhere. It's TikTok. We now learn that Trump threatened TikTok, they did ban it. So what did TikTok do? They increased the algorithm more preferential to him during the election campaign. It's everywhere. And it's a problem, as you say, of monopoly. As Heidi says, as a public good, it seems like a public good, but just like railway and water and all the utilities were at the end of the 19th century, they're falling apart because they were privatized. We've got to reconsider the whole thing.
I want to go to Bruce in a moment, and I'll tell you all about Bruce and exactly why he's very important for this conversation. But Heidi, I just want to quote as well the other tweet that was, or post that was alerted to me by Michelle. So she's sent me a post from somebody called Arsis Joshi, who I don't know, but Arsis says that scrolling down my feed on on Blue Sky, plenty of posts on climate and US politics, hardly any Palestinian voices or anything on Palestine. It really feels like a comfortable bubble for Western folks to discuss how to save the world without getting distracted by genocide. And there is the danger, isn't there, that if we exclude, if we block, if we mute everything that we don't like, truly we will be in a virtuous, as defined by us, echo chamber.
Oh gosh, that is such a great point. I was telling Peter in our most recent Byline supplement meeting that I'd just done an interview with my friend Chauncey De Vega from Salon, and I just sort of like listened as he just kind of just ripped the media. And his point is that the pundits in America have been comfortably talking amongst themselves for a long time. And the only people they were really influencing were themselves and not people kind of outside of their bubble. And I understood exactly what he meant by that. And, just as I'm listening to you guys talk, I'm reflecting back on when I read the Doppelganger affidavit about the Russian operated websites that were mimicking Western websites. And the Russians who do this work, who put out this information chaos, as Carol Cadwalader calls it, they know us better than we know ourselves. And that was really a very tragic moment for me. It wasn't like they're confused about what our situations are and our plights are. They actually are very clear eyed about it. And kind of going back to what you were saying about, the impact. I have been on this platform doing counter messaging for a very long time. And one of the Byline pieces that I did, Peter, I think it was maybe the second unmusked, got maybe like 4,000 likes and as many retweets and hundreds of thousands of views. And then what happened to the third or fourth unmusk in the series? We get like 23 retweets, 40 likes. Like there was a big drop off. And, whether that's internet magic or, a suppression, unless you're on the inside, I guess you don't really know. And I just want to point people to France, where they are arresting their tech bros. They arrested the head of Telegram, where allegedly many crimes are occurring. In addition, they may actually be imprisoning and banning their version of Trump from running in France. All the things that we talk about have solutions. We in America just have not been willing in any meaningful way to engage in any solution-based thinking.
Okay, Heidi, I will come back to you and Peter as well, but I do want to welcome Bruce Daisley to the conversation. Bruce is a former European Vice President of Twitter. Bruce, welcome. Great to have you on Byline Radio and the Byline podcast.
You had to drag me here, didn't you, Adrian? Because I've deactivated, I've stopped using it. So, so I've come back here as a guest for you.
I can't tell you how grateful we are and how grateful I am. And thank you really for that, genuinely. So what do you make of what's going on, Bruce?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? What everyone's tipping point is, because for a lot of people, they probably set up a Threads account a year ago, or they set up a Blue Sky account a year ago, and we've tried it. It hasn't quite done the job, and so we've found ourselves reluctant participants of Musk's party. Whereas for me, the election was probably the end, and you know. It raises a really interesting point. I deleted the app off my phone. There's still some content. I think everyone has said here today, there's still some content I'm struggling to find elsewhere. My mother-in-law's home is being bombed at the moment. And so, it's much easier to find content about bombing in Beirut on X than it is anywhere else. Threads is so anodyne and so devoid of news content. It's pretty clear that that's not the answer. And like a lot of people, I'm trying to make Blue Sky work right now. And to be honest, if I can't make it work, then maybe I just need to dial down the amount I use of social media. But yeah.
Which for somebody who's a former VP, European VP of Twitter, is something, isn't it? And you and I have spoken before about Musk, and I think when he first took over, you were reasonably guarded, a kind of bit of a, let's wait and see what happens. I think you were out of there, weren't you, before Musk took over?
Yeah, he didn't fire me, but he fired a lot of my friends, let's put it that way.
And did you think at the time there was hope? Was it obvious to people inside that it kind of had a beginning and the end kind of feeling?
I think a lot of us have been on a journey with Elon Musk, haven't we? Where we can't help but recognise the duality that his business achievements seem inarguable, but simultaneously we find ourselves seeing him behave like the jackass in chief, and he looks like a sort of very contemporary version of toxic masculinity. He's far more adjacent to Trump in the way he behaves. There's a lot of Dunning-Kruger going on there. He obviously believes he understands more about things than he actually does. But yeah, I've never had high hopes for his takeover, and just by the pantomime he went through to complete it, and he certainly missed every expectation I had since.
When you worked there, Bruce, it was in, I suppose, the glory days of the tech bros, wasn't it? When it felt open, it felt as though you were pioneering, that this was a new way of doing media. I think we can't lose sight of that. It's a very short time span. But when I first came across Twitter, when I was making a kind of blog in Birmingham around 2010, that sort of era, access to Twitter sort of opened up a whole world, like Heidi said, a world of contacts, but also a world of influence, of being able to reach people around the world that I would not have been able to reach otherwise.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, the era of the internet between 2008 and 2012, 2013. So, anyone who used Twitter during the Olympics, or anyone who used Twitter, on the other hand, during the London riots that happened in 2011, actually, there was something remarkable about being able to feel like you were following news completely disintermediated from the press barons. And it was probably an era before we were even talking about the concept of tech bros, meaning the oligarchs who now own these companies. So, it was a far simpler period of time. And I think the advent of Donald Trump, probably the arrival of his candidacy in 2015, probably marked the bookend of that era of the internet, where suddenly this tool that was carefree, frivolous, a bit fun, anyone who used Tumblr in that era, that was a great era for the internet, full stop. And we've gone into something which is a touch worse. And one of the things that you often say, I was doing a talk somewhere recently, and someone said, "Oh, the solution to bad speech is more speech." Well, I think that overlooks the lesson of that era, where we saw social media platforms being weaponized, and bad actors and people who they were presenting themselves as being, and we went past an era where it was just discourse, and these tools, because they'd been proven to be so powerful, were being misused and abused by other people. And I think that's the challenge of the era we're in now. You can't necessarily take everything for granted as it is seen.
Yeah, I think it tells its own story, though, that until I asked you to come on this conversation, you've deleted the X app, as somebody, an enthusiast, somebody who's passionate for it and believed that its excesses could be curbed, that moderation could work, because I think that was the context in which I first spoke to you. You've given up on it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, look, I don't care about follower numbers. I never have. All I'm interested in is seeing content that I can't get out anywhere else. For me, as a pop music fan, as a tennis fan, Twitter was transformational because, firstly, I could hear from people that I'd never met in real life. If you're interested in a minority interest like tennis or pop music, you often struggle to feel like you connected to other people. That's why fanzines were so popular in a previous generation, because you felt like you were part of something. And so Twitter was transformational for that. But I felt, suddenly I wasn't the only person in the world interested in the exploits of sort of major tennis stars. So social media is exceptional for that. And I'm struggling to find some of that community on some of the replacement products. Fingers crossed. I mean, the amount of people joining Blue Sky right now is joyous to see, actually. And I think there's this recognition amongst everyone that actually it's probably going to be Blue Sky rather than Threads. There's a brilliant newsletter that I'd recommend to anyone who's interested in popular culture, called Garbage Day. And Ryan Broderick, who runs that, yesterday said it looks like Blue Sky is going to be the winner. And I have to say, it's not really owned by anyone. It's not an ad-based business. You can bring your own algorithms and add adjustments to it. It seems like it's the least oligarch-controlled replacement, really.
Yeah. Have you got to rush off, by the way?
I
You
do.
do. Okay. Well, brilliant. Well, can I just say thank you then, and just recommend as well, Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat.com. That's your website. You do a great podcast around workplace culture. You've written a couple of excellent books as well, one of which sits in my toilet.
Okay.
For good reading, Fortitude, which I really enjoyed reading, actually, and The Joy of Work as well, and Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat. So do check out his very fine work, Bruce Daisley. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Adrian.
You can delete it again now. Good to speak to you. Thank you, mate. Good to speak to you. Peter, I don't know if you got any thoughts on what Bruce has just shared with us there.
Well, I just a bit shocked you keep his book in your toilet and flying it. It's got absorbent paper. No, what I suppose, my thought is that weird moment, yes, that sort of utopian moment, the sort of grief for that utopian moment where you could follow things in real time. I remember, not only meet the team through Twitter first to write for Byline Times. I remember extraordinary moments like, Rupert Murdoch replying to me. I was writing a book. And I tweet something about Rupert Murdoch when he was on Twitter briefly, with the man, all this paper felt he didn't have a voice. I was on Twitter for about 10 years ago for a couple of years. And that extraordinary peer-to-peer. Now, and it has happened to people I know, if Elon Musk replies to you, you better watch out. You're going to be trolled. You're going to be doxxed. It's going to be horrific. There's certain people you do not want to get into an argument with anymore because you can't. It's not a debate. It's stochastic terrorism. It's, you are overwhelmed. You're bombarded with bought-for bots and insincere people. And it is a great tragedy. And one day they'll do a movie about it, be like the fall of the Roman Empire with, Elon Musk playing Caligula. But it's a one-trick pony. I do think it is Cambridge Analytica scale, but you can only pull this off once, really, because once people begin to see through it, obviously there's a wider media problem with Sinclair Radio, right-wing talk shows, these fake local newspapers. I write about all this in the editorial of Byline Times out this evening, in digital and print. There's not just X, but X makes it so salient that we've all had to grow up, and what a falling off was there. And as I said, I think people should be rightly suspicious of Blue Sky, but it is in a much better state than X.
You described yourself, I think, as binary earlier.
Non-binary. Non-binary.
Michelle says she's poly.
Yeah,
when it comes to platforms. Michelle's on Spout, Bible, Blue Sky, and she's staying here. Let's get a word with Kathy. How are you doing, Kathy? Welcome.
Hiya, how's it? How is everyone?
Yeah, good. Nice to speak to you. Peter's here. Heidi's here.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I was absolutely gutted, actually. I was hoping to get to speak to Bruce then, but obviously he had to rush off. It was something very specific that I wanted to ask him, and alluded to it this morning over at the other place, and it's about the data. You can see that, how X has sort of like been collapsing around its ears and everything. Things are not going to end well. We don't know how they're going to end, but they're not going to end well anywhere. But I was specifically wanting to ask Bruce, Twitter's been such an enormous part of so many people's lives. We know how invaluable it's been across the world. And it's a question of the data. If it does collapse, if Twitter does collapse, and you've got a chronological, historical record, it's an archive, it's our social commentary for the past 20 years, it's a crime scene, it's evidence, it's all of these things. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, I see this like vindictive streak in him, and with what he's done to the place and everything. It's a vandalism. It's intellectual vandalism. So what with his nefarious things and the AI and everything else and the people that he surrounds himself with and the oligarchs, what is going to come of that data? It's a gold mine. Everything, everything is there. What is going to come of it?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure Bruce would
know
the answer to that either. But I think you raise a really interesting and scary point, really.
Sorry.
No. Well, somebody else might be able to answer that.
Can I just give my 2 cents on that, Adrian?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, Kathy, so great to hear your voice. You've always been such a lovely supporter of what we do at Byline. I just wanted to say, Bruce Daisley, I wanted to thank him because he gave me a great line for, I think, Unmusk 3, because he'd written in The Guardian that if Musk keeps stirring unrest, get an arrest warrant. Then, of course, we saw that, Pavel Durov, head of Telegram, was actually arrested. So it was really quite an exciting moment in time. But I just wanted to say I have been doing a deep dive on the 2016 election in America, which I think is the biggest crime scene in our country's history. And so I've been doing that by going through 2016 old threads. And I literally am like some sort of like archaeologist where I go on this dig and I have to work around all these deleted tweets and then go to Internet Archive and what was there before. And I pieced together so many of the same players that we saw promoting Trump and Russian propaganda in 2016, doing the same in 2020 leading up to the coup, doing the same in 2024. So the internet never forgets, although they will try very hard. These deleted tweets, these accounts, I've managed to string enough of it together to show the evidence. And I just wanted to bring that up because what happened in 2016 was never properly investigated. And I believe that it holds the clues to what happened in 2024. And that, yes, everybody here who has a wealth of data should, absolutely archive their own. But her point is an incredible one. When does this become something that law enforcement would actually allegedly involve themselves in? Under a Trump regime, that won't happen.
Peter, I have to be very careful how I say this, but there have been examples in the past in relation to phone hacking where material that might be of interest to law enforcement has unfortunately been unavailable.
You have to be careful. 20 million emails were deleted every time the police or litigants requested News UK or News International, as it was then, to keep material to investigate phone hacking. I mean, this is a bigger hack than that. I think, and obviously data laws are much looser in America, but my suspicion is that, Musk has said, we're going to use your data. So I was told, you have to be careful because your direct messages aren't being hacked. I don't think that's happened as yet, but definitely in the Facebook instance of Cambridge Analytica hacking 75 million Facebook accounts, basically anybody and all their friends who'd use this one My Digital Life app, the individual messages were readable. But it's more the sort of data they get on you, to your general personality, your type, your voting intentions, what can suppress you. So all that data, I think Musk said we're going to use that. I think there's a new terms and conditions. I think that's why some people are scoffing. That's why I don't put anything personal in there. I wouldn't now, because that is now up for grabs, and the laws, there aren't the same protections of laws in the US as there are here. The other great tragedy is, I think, as Heidi points out, we all point out, millions of people invested their time and energy, their skills, their observations, their photographs, their emotions into building something they thought was for everyone. And then in one of the greatest snatches and grabs of history, Elon Musk has taken over the library of Alexandria and will either burn it or turn it into toxic sludge. So it is, the Wayback Machine, which Heidi's used, is suffering. Where in this great digital world of connection are our memories going to be kept? I mean, Facebook keeps on telling me your memories. What the hell? What are you doing telling me my memories? It's like the bloody Matrix, And I notice, I'm sure we all notice this. I was a techno enthusiast. I used to write in the 90s about how we revolutionized the means of distribution, production, and exchange. I can't get my old photographs back from the late 90s, early noughts. I have no idea what format they're on. If I hadn't printed them out, they're all gone, let alone my emails. Microsoft, what was that thing I used to use? PSD files, Microsoft Office. It's the great unrememberings going on.
Look, guys, I've got time for a couple more callers, and I want to give space to them as well. Thank you, Kathy. It's been brilliant to hear from you. Really appreciate it. And as Heidi says, you are a great supporter of Byline, and it is very, very much appreciated. Thank you. Paul Nyland is with us. Hi, Paul. Welcome.
Hi, Adrian. It's nice to be chatting with you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, and thanks for your patience. Appreciate it.
No, not at all. Listen, I just got two quick things. Heidi, first of all, to you. I want you to know, I mean, you know anyway that I read all of your stuff all of the time. And there was one line that really struck me in your newsletter in the days after the election result. And you said, how must his victims who have come forward to talk about what happened to them feel that millions of people voted for his abuser? And that line is one of the things that has really struck me the most since the election. And I just sat and stared at it. I read it several times.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, I'm looking at you, Adrian, and Peter, and just thinking that, we've been kind of a beautiful island in all of this.
And then the question that I had, Peter, you mentioned something a few minutes back about Donald Trump having said that he was going to ban TikTok. And then when TikTok came to him and said and agreed to boost his posts, all of a sudden he's fine with them. I'm sorry, the first question is they did what? And the second is, do you have more information on that? Do you know the boost that he was given? What on earth?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to dig up the link again. I was writing for the editorial yesterday, and I'll have to dig it up. But it's well attested that, yeah, he suddenly, I think yesterday, said, oh, I'm not going to ban TikTok anymore. And a reporter said, yes, that's because you, I got a well-respected reporter, can't remember his name, because, you know, over that month of the campaign, there was boosting of right-wing content. And a lot of the interesting thing, this came out of the fact that most Latinos get their, especially younger Latinos, but also young people get their news through TikTok. Like 40-50% of them get through TikTok, and they swang massively. Well, not swung massively. There's a big shift, 20% shift towards Trump away from the Democrats.
So that's a massive swing, yeah.
Yeah, so a massive swing, effectively. Yeah, it was a big swing. And, you know, we saw in real time what happened with the owners of the LA Times and Washington Post. The guard called them the JB name, Jeff Bezos. These are companies easily intimidated by the most powerful man in the world who will do him favors. So I'll dig out some more details for you if you want.
Please do. Thanks so much, Peter.
Great to speak to you, Paul. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Heidi. I think we'll wrap it up there, but it's been a fascinating conversation. I think the takeaway is that for now, anyway, Byline will remain on X because it is still a place where we have an audience, and ultimately we don't want to let down our audience. And it's a place where this kind of space, although again there are other platforms for this, but where there's an established platform for this, where we will continue to do this, but we will increasingly migrate to Blue Sky. Is that a fair summary, Peter?
Yes, I mean, we have a duty to reach audiences just in a broadcast way. I think personal choices, you know, and communities, that's a different issue. And there's a much better community on Blue Sky. It is a bit of a echo chamber, but we like talking to our community. So I think, yeah, well, we may post stuff increasingly on X, which allow no replies or one of things like that, and just use it as a broadcast, really, not an interactive channel.
Yes, indeed. One man's echo chamber is another woman's community, I think it's fair to say. Heidi, thank you. Did you want to say anything to close?
Just a quick note, which I think was very important. I worked in community politics in 2022, and I was shocked and dismayed at the Democratic establishment's denial about information warfare and denial about how hard we've been attacked by hostile foreign powers through social media for a decade, and the signs were everywhere. And I think there was just a part of them that just thought truth and goodness would see us through. We're in a war. There are no civilians. We right now are talking on a virtual battlefield, and just, you know, do what's right for you and your family. The last thing, there's still no place like Twitter for breaking news, and that's a fact. Things happen. You look on Google, like what's happening. There's nothing from the major networks. You go to Twitter, you find it out quickly. So that's our rock in a hard place.
Indeed, we are between that rock and that hard place. Heidi, thank you. Heidi Sigmund Kuda, thank you to you. Thank you to Peter Jukes, the executive editor of the Byline Times. And thank you especially to Bruce Daisley, former European Vice President of Twitter, as it then was, for joining us. And thanks to Harvey White, who is helping to produce this episode for the Byline podcast. Thank you to everybody, most of all, for listening. And don't forget to support our work. The best thing you can do is take out a subscription to our wonderful monthly periodical. You heard Peter saying that the latest edition is out pretty much now. It's a brilliant monthly newspaper, and it contains articles that you can't read anywhere else. It has loads of unique content in it, as well as the best of our online offerings. So head over to bylinetimes.com and take out a subscription. And why not buy a subscription for somebody else for Christmas? You know, it makes sense. bylinetimes.com, take out a subscription to the Byline Times and help our work in just trying to tell the truth. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again soon. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Byline